Anyway, no. I love you. Anyway. Thank you. Thank God. Awakening to love and life. We've been talking about the 12 powers this month, and in unity, those are 12 gifts that we all have. They are naturally created within us. They're not a mystery. And when we start to use the words, it's not like something weird is going on. All of us have imagination. All of us have the ability to love. All of us have willpower, or will, more defined as a power. All of us have faith. You know all those things about yourself, right? What the key is how do I direct them? How do I use them? And what are they all about? And an idea that I'd like to share with you this morning is that we cannot live life fully without unconditional love as the foundation. That unconditional love is created in such a way that we cannot express it if we don't love ourselves unconditionally. That is really an important key. Life without love is only living in a shell we call life, and you know, we can do better than that. We absolutely can do better than that. Unconditional love is not, here's some nots, it is not being blinded by love. You know, when you fall in love that first time, and that person is perfect, and a year later you wake up and they're not quite as perfect as they were the first time you met them. You know what I'm talking about, right? So anyway, what we're talking about is that the longer we are with somebody, the more we love them because we accept them as they are. We stop trying to fix them. We stop thinking that they ought to be different. And we allow them to be who they are. And that takes a lot of strength sometimes, to be honest. It takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of willpower. And I'm speaking personally from time to time, okay? But anyway, about me, not her. To make sure I'm clear on that. And so as we come into that ability to do that, we start to learn to really love ourselves because, you see, that's the way that we can reflect the love. We can express the love. We can be the love in life. Now, there's a story I want to share with you. It takes place in a big city hospital. And there is a young woman laying in a bed, drifting in and out of consciousness, not truly aware of where she is or what's going on. And as she drifts in and out of consciousness, she begins to see the ceiling, but doesn't recognize it. She begins to see the lights, and they're like a glare in her eye. And it causes like a foggy sensation as she lays there. And as she lays there, she becomes fearful. She becomes scared because she doesn't know where she is and why she's there. You know, it's kind of like taking that nap in the afternoon or in the evening, and you wake up and you think it's the next day, and you jump up and think you're late to work. You know, I don't know if you've done that, but I've done that. Yes, we all have done that. Well, it's kind of the stage she was in. She didn't know where she was, and she wasn't even assured that she was supposed to wake up. That's what was in her head. And as she laid there, what was happening was that there was a struggle going on, a fight going on, and it was a fight for her life. In her lucid moments, the doctors finally said, "Miss, we're going to have to amputate your legs on Monday." This was a Saturday morning they were talking to her. That's the only way we can save your life. And she laid there and said, "I'm not surprised." And as she would go in and out during the evening, there was a nurse sitting there doing suicide watch for her and wanting to protect her. But this nurse was more than that. This nurse was a person who just was love. Set in love. Expressed with love. And this young woman, some kind of way, must have sensed that. And this young woman would, in her times of being not totally clear, would start to yell out about how life had been unfair to her, how her husband didn't love her, how her family didn't teach her to love. And She had a great deal of anger, a great deal of remorse. And then, at one point during the evening, she remembered what had happened. That she'd been in an automobile accident. The nurse who was with her said, "Honey, what in the world is going on in your life? I know you are hurting. And you know, life is to be happy. Life is to be joyful. And we all have that inside of us." And she sat with her and affirmed that love was possible in this young woman. And the young woman said, no, sorry, it's not possible. I don't know how to love. And she said, you don't have to know how to love. You are love. And affirmed that with her several times. And said, may I pray with you? And the young woman said, well, yeah, you can pray with me. And she would pray with her a prayer of affirmation that her love would be coming out and her happiness would unfold and she would see it. But yet this young woman couldn't accept that in that moment. And during the evening, when the nurse had to leave and another nurse came in, she said to the nurse, please continue to pray for me. I've not believed in prayer very much, but I can tell you're different. You're making a difference for me. Thank you. Please continue to pray. And she fell off to sleep. When she woke up on Sunday morning in the chapel, she heard a story, or heard a song that many of us have heard before, especially if you came from a Baptist background. And it said, at the cross, where I first saw the light, and the burden of my heart rolled away. It is there by faith I received my sight, and now I am happy all the day. That young lady recognized that she had come to a crossroads in her life, like many of us. She recognized that she was living in pain and that it was by her own choice because she heard that message from that young nurse. She recognized that she wanted more in life. And here was somebody who was affirming that she was loved. And when she heard those words, she began to see herself anew. And she began to say, God, I want to be happy. And then she thought, geez, I've just learned this, and they tell me I'm going to die. I'm going to lose my legs. What do I do? And she said, God, if I can't be happy, then let me go. That'll be fine. She was praying to a God out there, but in that moment, that's what she needed. But she was listening to the God within, which was making a change in her life. And so when she felt a little better that day, she started to act happy. She said, I'm going to be happy even though I'm dying. I'm going to accept the way things are, and I am going to love everybody who walks in this room. I'm going to be like that nurse. I'm going to emulate who she is. I am going to be loved. She made up her mind that. And as she lay there in bed, she started to sing other songs that she knew. She started to tell a few jokes, which she didn't even know where they came from because it wasn't her style. The nurse came in later that day and said, how are you doing? She says, I am happy. I am free. I have just gotten my spiritual eyesight. This is a true story, by the way. And the woman said, I can see that in you. But I wonder, where's your husband? Where's your family? And she said, well, they were out of town. They found out about this, and they're coming tomorrow morning. That's Monday morning. So they'll be here for the operation. Well, she continued on. And she started to realize that she was not alone, but that love was surrounding her as she lay there in that hospital room. You know, here was a woman who had felt victimized, lost, alone, unloved, facing death. And many of us have had those same feelings at times in our lives. There might be some sitting here this morning who feel that way in the moment. And what she learned is she had a choice to either feel that way or to accept happiness. To feel that way or to allow herself to love herself enough that it shined out from her. And as she did that, she found out that the fear and the darkness were no longer there. What had happened was that she had gone to the hospital. To a lawyer's office. That's kind of like going to the hospital. No, I'm sorry. Is Mike here this morning? No, anyway. It's kind of like she was going to see a lawyer about divorcing her husband. And she didn't want to do that, but she felt like that was the only thing she could do because he could not show her love whatsoever. And on the way back home, she started gassing up the car in her anger, in her disappointment, in her loneliness. And she gassed it up and got it going faster and faster and finally hit a tree and crashed. Out of her anger, she was hurting herself. She understood that. So what happened is that when her family came to the hospital on Monday morning, they could not believe what they were experiencing. She was actually smiling, and many of them hadn't seen her smile in months. She was laughing, and many of them had not seen her laugh in months because she was totally depressed. And as that took place, she started to actually connect with this husband because, you see, she started to understand it wasn't him, it was her. When we are depressed, when we are hurting, when we aren't loving ourselves enough, we can't feel the love coming from another person. And we certainly can't express it. And in this miraculous way, she understood that and started doing that. And she started to realize it was her and her stuff, not theirs, that was causing the loneliness and the darkness. And then the doctors came in, and they could see that emotionally and mentally and even physically she was looking better. And so they did their diagnosis to get ready for the operation. And they looked up at her and said, "You're not going to believe this, but the blockage in your legs has been released, and you do not have to have your legs amputated." Isn't that amazing? Just because she started to love herself, love her body, believe in herself, and believe in others, it changed her life. And over the next 24 years, she had a daughter. And she was not able to have children, they told her before that. She was able to step into that love, and she was able to express it to others throughout the community. And she became like the nurse, a loving, caring, compassionate person. Because in that hospital bed, somebody reached out and touched her. You and I have that opportunity to reach out and touch others. You know, sometimes when life isn't going quite the way we want to it, it's kind of like needing repair. We need to be repaired. You know, you've seen on the highways, especially around Richmond these days, men at work signs, right? Under construction signs. When we need repair, what we need to do is have signs that we see in our minds that say love at work sign, God at work sign, Spirit at work sign. And at the end of the construction site, which is when we're coming out and we are loving ourselves, we see a sign that says life at work is love expressing. That's what it's all about. That's what we are all about. Without love, there cannot be a life filled with hope and vitality, purpose, and expression. It just can't happen. We have to love ourselves to experience that. Fear creates confusion and self-pity. Unconditional love creates life filled with purpose. The purpose to love others, care for others, just because they are who they are. Not to receive something from it, not to feel like a good person because of what you're doing, because you will if you do it without any reservations, but because you love each and every person unconditionally, and you want what is best for them, no matter how they act, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. Now, sometimes we have to remove ourselves from that person. I shared in the Course in Miracles this morning that at one point in my life, my son and I didn't get along very well. I thought it was his fault. He thought it was my fault. And every time we had a discussion, and he was around 23, 24 years old, and I was old enough to know better, we would get into this argument, and we would yell and scream at each other. You know, here's a 40-something-year-old man yelling at a kid. Boy, I had work to do too. And so what we agreed to do, or I agreed that we would do, is that we would not talk with each other until we could calm down. And that took 2.5 years. Long time. We were estranged for 2.5 years. I came into unity during that time, and I started to visualizing, not to fix, but just visualizing a son I could communicate with. I wasn't going to change him. That wasn't my objective. It was to behold the best in him, the Christ in him. That's what I was being taught. Why not try it out? I never called him. And after I've been in unity for about 2 years, he called me. And it was like, hey, Dad, how's everything going? And I'm going, whoa, time out. Didn't we agree we wouldn't talk to each other? Oh, man, I am over that stuff. And he shared with me some thoughts that he had that he realized were wrong. Like, you know, you love my sister more than you love me. Things like that. And we talked about it. And we've never had an ill word towards each other for over 20 years now. Isn't that wonderful? You see, it's us changing our attitude, us saying yes to the Christ within that person, us saying yes to the Christ, within us. Spirit's starting to speak all of a sudden. And as we do that, we become the unconditional love, and we live a life that truly has meaning. Because we live a life to love others. It's automatic. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to act it. You are that. And so love and life go together. They're kind of like, what are they like? They're like two things that are necessary, two ingredients, if you would, in a recipe. And without those two ingredients, you do not get the chocolate chip cookies. That's what they're like. And when they're together, you get all of life and all the beauty of life when you express it. John Lennon, Beatles month, said, there are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. I think he read the Course in Miracles. When we are afraid, we pull back from life. When we are in love, we open to all that life has to offer with passion, with excitement, and with acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first, in all our glory and our imperfections. That's unconditional love. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. The world rests in fearlessness and is open-hearted when people embrace and see the vision of life itself touching their hearts. Then he wrote, imagination. The Buddha said, and listen to this, please, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserves your love and affection. That's what Jesus said. That's what Gandhi said. That's what Martin Luther King said. That's what many of the great leaders, spiritual leaders in this world have said. You deserve to love yourself because you see you are an expression of God. You are a spiritual being, not a human being. You just live in the human condition. And when you live in spirit, when you work towards being that expression of God, then you learn to love yourself. And everything else becomes much easier. Before we finish today, I'm asking you to affirm these affirmations with me and to share them with me. The first one is, I choose faith. Together, I choose faith. I choose imagination. I choose imagination. I choose spiritual understanding. I choose spiritual understanding. I choose free will. I choose free will. I choose love, and I choose life. And I'm going to live it with all my heart. Say that. And I'm going to live it with all my heart. And yes, you are. Thank you, God. Thank you.